feed items and supplies. That's the equivalent of 110 trucks of equipment, food and equipment and supplies. We are looking through transport and main roads as well as opening up alternative routes into places such as Tully, and we've had advice later this morning that road access where it's available up to Mackay, we've now got road access at least through to Tully, and alternative routes are being sought to ensure that we can get those supply operations underway. The final point I just want to conclude on is to again reassure those communities, particularly in the hardest hit areas, that we understand the difficulties that they are experiencing. We know that power is cut. We know that communications is difficult. We know that moving around those communities is difficult. But there are many people in the areas working on these issues, and many more will be seen in the areas over the next couple of days. I'd like to ask the Deputy Commissioner to say a few words, and then we're happy to answer any more detailed questions.
Thank you, Minister. And in relation to the missing persons, we are still undertaking inquiries to look for 2 people, both males, in that Cardwell area. Certainly they will be a focus when we have the resources available to get in there and conduct appropriate searches. Up until that time, we'll be undertaking the necessary inquiries to try and locate them. I can provide that afterwards.
And is one of those people that are missing that gentleman reporting to Brookfield down to attend job?
That's correct.
Before we have any more questions, I might just ask Bruce Grady from EMQ to say a few words about some of the responses from the Department of Community Safety personnel as well.
Thanks, Minister. As I advised yesterday, 50 additional SES personnel were flown into Cairns, with a further 140 today and 100 scheduled to go tomorrow, with more on standby. As the Minister said, there's more than 500 who are already ready to deploy into the area. They do need to be staged. We do need to make sure that when they arrive that we make best use of these people, and that's why yesterday was spent making assessments so that we can develop the appropriate strategies to get these people in to start assisting the community as early as possible. To give some further indications of the scale of the event, the 132500 number to the SES has now taken 4,183 calls directly related to this event. That's resulted in 2,823 tasks, and 960 of those tasks relate to people reporting significant damage to their properties. So they will be the focus of these SES crews as they deploy into the area. You can imagine the sort of work, tarpaulins on roofs, getting these properties back into to a livable state. That's our priority over the next few days and the early weeks of this event.
Thank you. People whose homes are being completely destroyed, where do they go?
That was the other point I needed to raise. The Department of Communities and Red Cross, Salvation Army, Lifeline, all of those service agencies are currently operating a number of evacuation centres, and they'll continue as required, and also opening up recovery centres, particularly in the highly impacted communities. For those people that do require longer-term accommodation, the Department of Communities will initially be working with those through the existing evacuation centres to identify appropriate properties and housing for them to move into for the longer term. So that's an issue which is currently being worked on and will continue to be resolved in the coming days.
Where is it the people who are missing? Who's reported them missing?
In relation to there is one male who has been reported by his sister, and she lives in Brisbane. There is another person who was talking to a friend overseas. This is the gentleman on the boat, and that report has come from the overseas contact, as I understand.
The first man you mentioned, is it the same one yesterday that you thought was missing?
No, totally different. We did locate a gentleman yesterday, but we've gone back up to 2 cases today. And this is totally different in terms of profile from from the flood events that we had just recently. We think that's mainly because the people were with their friends and loved ones at the time of the cyclone passed, and so everyone knows that they're okay, that they got through this in the main. And there was also a window of opportunity after Yasi passed that there were good communications still available to people. What's happened now is those communications have failed, not because of only because of destruction of phone towers and other infrastructure, but because now battery backup is starting to wane on those types of things. So people just can't locate their friends.
The Western referred to are all okay in
Yes, at this morning's teleconference we had the mayors and district disaster coordinators from each of those districts, and whereas there have been reports of trees down and minor impacts in various properties, basically the impact has been negligible. So again, we just really do thank those communities in those regions which have felt the impact overnight for cooperating with their local disaster and district disaster groups, and thankfully Yasi is now reduced to a low pressure system, still leaving a bit of rain, particularly up in the Gulf area. So there are some issues up there in terms of flooding that might develop over the next few days. But thankfully, as it approached towards Julia Creek, Mount Isa, it weakened, and we haven't had any reports of any significant damage.
Have you, which communities have you not been able to get into?
Well, many of these communities already do have police, emergency services personnel in them with the local residents. It's been a difficulty in accessing those communities by road with heavy equipment, etc. But as I've indicated earlier, the areas where we want to do some aerial surveillance today are Halifax, Lucinda area, some of those smaller communities, and we'll get the air assets into the air today and this morning. We'll get a better picture of the damage in those particular locations. Well, it's predominantly damage. Obviously, there is still some communication and intermittent communication into some of these areas. And as the Deputy Commissioner has indicated, we've only had those 2 reports of missing persons at this stage. So predominantly the focus is on getting an assessment of the damage. There's going to be a lot of rebuilding work in a lot of communities. And we need to get as accurate as possible an assessment of the damage. If we can do that by air initially, ultimately it needs to be house by house, building by building. We know, for example, in places like Tully, it's not just the significant number of residential properties that have been damaged in the CBD. There is significant damage to commercial and industrial properties as well. All of those assessments will take time.
We have to buy supplies to those communities.
Well, we're looking at all options in terms of resupply. That's a key focus of the disaster groups locally and at the state level. Resupply of communities is an absolutely essential role that is being undertaken, and whether it needs to be flown in by truck, ultimately we need hopefully to get the rail lines open as well. Whatever means is available, we'll be using that to get resupply of essential items and foodstuffs into those communities. Well, look, that's an issue which I've heard is raised. I mean, we have a very significant cooperative arrangement with the federal government under the Natural Disaster Relief and Recovery Arrangement. It's been long-standing. It works well. What that system means is that when a particular trigger point is reached in terms of damage, both the state and the Commonwealth contribute towards the costs of restoration. It's worked well in Queensland, and I expect it to work well into the future.
But if an ordinary citizen has to have insurance to protect their property, why shouldn't the state government have insurance to protect public property?
Well, these are questions which ultimately are not the responsibility of the Emergency Services and Police Minister. My major focus is an operational response, so some of those questions should be directed to others. But
which one, sorry?
That we do have very robust arrangements in place, agreements with the Commonwealth Government about what to do to restore public assets, whether that be state government assets or council assets. So, and that system has worked well cooperatively.
There's George Roberts.
For many, many years, and we expect it to work well into the future.
Just down here, on the left. Just past the bus stop on the left.
Expected to arrive today. I don't have a precise time. That will, of course, be determined by tides. But again, 2,750 tonnes of essential feed items and supplies, which is good news for that community. But I just stress again that a lot of work is been undertaken to look at alternative routes to get road access into many of these communities, and that work is underway, and the trucks are starting to move as we speak.
And in terms of policing in the affected areas, has there been any arrests of people?
In the last couple of days, we've had about 11 cases that could be analogous to looting offences, but some of those have been opportunistic, like the break and enter of a pharmacy on Wednesday night in Cairns at the height of the crossing of Yasi. And I think that might give an indication of the mentality of the people involved. But certainly, it's only 11 at this time, since Yasi's event started.
Then you say, so how many of those 11 cases are
No, the 11 are similar or actual looting offences. I think it's a disgrace, and it really is a disgrace that people would even consider doing this sort of thing at a time when the trauma being suffered by our community is so great. I don't know. Thank you. I know the one in Cairns. There was one in Cairns on Wednesday night. The other details I can get to you after.
And they've been charged or arrested, or where's that process then?
No, I can't say they've all been charged, but there have been 11 cases. Okay, thank you.
That's the Queensland Emergency Services Minister Neil Roberts in Brisbane. Also there, the State Disaster Controller Ian Stewart and Bruce Gray of Emergency Management Queensland. You're listening to ABC News Radio. 17 minutes past 11 Eastern Summer Time, 13 to 11 in Adelaide, 17 past 10 in Brisbane. It's 13 minutes to 10 in Darwin, 17 minutes past 8 in Perth. Let's get a quick update from the ABC News Radio Sports Desk. Joining us once again in the studio is Chris Glaser. Chris, good morning.
Yes, good morning, John. First to the AFL, and that AFL game tonight between the Indigenous All-Stars at Richmond has been cancelled because of predicted bad weather associated with what was Cyclone Yasi moving across Alice Springs. So unfortunately that game is cancelled, and there's been some issues down in St Kilda too with the captain Nick Revolt saying outside forces are conspiring to destabilise the Saints as it prepares for the new season. Revolt